get a roll call vote.
Mr. Farrier. Lewis.
Yes, present.
Aye, here.
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
Silva.
Here.
Mr. Simpson. Mr. Tavarro. Here. Minatiro. Chairman Furtado. Public comments and communications. I don't see anyone here. New business, approval of minutes, July 19th, 2023.
Through the chair. I know. This is to the clerk. I have received, and I just want a clarification, received, I'm trying to pull it up, Val. We have no agendas, right, Mark? No printed ones?
We don't today.
Okay. All right, no, yeah, that's not what I want. I said agenda, but that's not what
Want the minutes?
No. One item, you sent us three items. And the first one is motions and votes. What is that up for approval? Is that?
No, that is just in addition to the minutes. Mr. Conley had suggested I do that, and so that's just so that everyone can see. As Mr. Conley says, that's his version of minutes.
That's all I put down when I did minutes. Just a clear recording of the motion and the vote.
Okay, and because I was sent one through email that had errors, this one that I was just handed has corrections. I just want to make sure we're not voting on anything that had errors on it. Dylan, do you see what the two different ones?
I haven't compared the two. I don't know which one you're looking
I
at.
probably sent them out again, and I had corrected them.
You had corrected them. Okay, just want to make sure that we're not voting on that.
No.
Was minor errors, but,
Right.
just so that there's no question later on in our lives. All right, that's my question.
Chairman, I've got some clarification here on item 2, on your motion requiring the commission, the member, it's the same thing. To me, it doesn't say here that you're not putting the cuffs, obviously, on the chairman. Well, the chairman, the way I'm reading this, the chairman can go to the city council anytime he desires because he's his chairman. But I'm looking at July 19, the motion on top, second item. What it says, at the minutes, yeah. That's what we're going to be voting on in a minute.
Right.
But I'm looking for clarification on a minute.
Okay.
So does that mean that as an individual, I can exercise my First Amendment, and I will do that if I have to? Because I didn't vote on that, I didn't support that. And and is the chairman included on this motion? Or it is just for the members of the commission? Because the problem that I have is, if the chairman goes to a meeting, and I understand it was voted, it gives me the right to discuss that. If you went to a meeting and they stick a mic on your face and say, by the way, how is the charter commission going? Well, does he have to come back to have permission for this body to speak? I mean, it's a little too.
So
Go
the way I would understand the motion is that he is in no way limited from talking in his individual capacity. But if he's going to talk on behalf of the commission to report, basically giving information as if he is giving information on behalf of the other members here, he would need the permission of this commission first. But that does not stop him from being able to comment and saying,
But it says
Yeah.
also with the press. But if you're at the city council meeting and the press walks by, it says, by the way, how is the charter going? I mean, you don't have the opportunity to talk to
you
the
can,
committee.
anyone can always speak in their individual capacity.
All right,
In their individual capacity.
individual capacity we can. So that's answer my question.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Discussion and vote for partisan elections, John Farrier.
Eh,
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Ferry begins, I thought that as a body, we had agreed that we would go through the charter item by item, line by line. That was going to be our protocol. That was going to be the procedure. And that's what we've done. We've gone through Article 1, 2, 3, and tonight what was going to be Article 4. And we have the finance director here because Article 4 addresses finances.
I thought it was pretty clear then, Mr. Commissioner, that we can
Do I have the floor,
propose
please?
anytime.
Do I,
Submit proposals anytime. Discuss. and-
Mr. Chairman, do I have the floor? My question is, do we have a process or a protocol as to which topics we will be addressing at our meetings? And are we going to follow the articles through the charter, or are we going to jump around? This has nothing to do with the validity of the request or the validity of the motion. I'm not debating the motion yet. All I'm talking about is the process. I thought we had a process, and that process was to go numerically through the charter. Okay. Partisan elections is item 11 in the charter. We're only up to item 4, or Article 4, if you want to call it article. The next item on our agenda deals with the pay increases for the mayor, the city council, and the school committee. We've already gone over city council and mayor. And salary and compensation was addressed in both of those instances. We have not yet gotten to the school committee. Okay, that's Article 11. I just want to know what the protocol is. What will we be addressing month to month? Will it follow a process, or are we going to jump around from item to item? Clarification, please.
So you're right in the sense of the agenda is going article by article. However, from the beginning, I have said to the members that if they wanted an item placed on the agenda, I will put it on the agenda. There have been things on the agenda I have not agreed with. There have been, members have put things on there that, members have put things on there that personally I wouldn't have liked to see on there, but I don't want to hamstring the commission by doing that. Again, going through this, setting the agenda, I think we have a good formula going article by article. But again, if the commission wants to formalize that, that's up to the commission. But as of right now, any member is welcome to put anything on there. And I also try my best to get it word for word for the request.
Mr. Chairman, I recall about a month ago, I had the same item on the agenda, and I brought it up for discussion. I'm glad that somebody else has interest in doing it. But at that time, we tabled it, and I was going to bring it back when we did the 11.5, well, partisan and nonpartisan. I thought maybe that was the reason why we tabled it. But when I seen it on the agenda, I said, good, let's get it up there. I'm for it anyway, so I just was wondering how that came about, because
This
the
discussion,
reason I dropped it was because it said, well, let's go in line with
right,
the agenda.
and that's what I was waiting for.
Mr. Chairman, if you remember, Mr. Tavares, when he had that for the discussion, non-binding, that's what you had, Joe. If you remembered what you had on
I didn't put non-binding. I just said, I
non-binding, that's what you had. If you-
didn't say non-binding.
You said non-binding. Well, look, see but that was a discussion and that was it. But you never came back, so it is my right, by the way, to come here and submit proposals. If it's voted by this body, it goes to the council. But if it's not, well, we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest that we at least change the order of the agenda, because I don't think it's fair to the finance director, who took time out of his schedule, and I'm sure had a long day, to have to wait for us to discuss procedure, which we seem to have an issue with. We should at least table it out of order, like take it out of order and bring the finance director up and let's move on with the next article. And then when he's done speaking, if we want to have this conversation, then we can have this conversation. But I don't think it's fair to Malcolm to have to sit there and extend his day longer while we're trying to figure out procedure. So I'll make that in the form of a motion if you so desire. If we could please move the agenda out of order and move up the pot with the finance director is here.
So specifically, are you asking for both items?
Specifically, yes. If it's involving Malcolm, I think we should, out of a courtesy to him, because he's been here all day, we should address those issues first. I don't think any commissioner here would disagree with that. I could be wrong. Let's let him go through what he needs to go through. Let's talk about the finance, ask him the questions. And then when we're done with that, then we can have this conversation.
Through the chair. I think because an agenda item had been brought up that is on the agenda in the order that it is on the agenda, I think the appropriate thing to do now is, and I agree with Commissioner Venatiro, that, and Commissioner Tavares, that we brought up something before, or that Commissioner Tavares brought it up, and we tabled it. And I think the intent of tabling that, I'm going to say to the commission, that's how I voted, was to make sure that it came up in the order that we're working this document, this charter. So with that being said, and you brought up, or the secretary, the clerk read the next agenda item, which was in order. I would move to table that item now.
There's a motion on the floor.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, Julie made a motion.
I'll remove,
Mr. Chairman, I get the floor, I'm sorry. I would respect, Mr. Chairman, because Malcolm is here to talk about, the issue. I respect that because he's here all day, he's got to go. Following his presentation, I'm on the docket for today with those items. That's what I'm on. So accepting to table, I'm the one who can table that. I'm not tabling anything. It's there. I don't know what the fear is.
Can I have a ruling from the solicitor on that?
What's the question?
If an item that is brought up can be asked to
Language on
move
this
to
motion
table.
that has been made. There was a motion that was made. I need specific language on this motion. I understand what you're trying to do. I just need specific language on the motion.
My
I'll remove my motion. I'll remove it.
So do you understand the question, Mrs.
Sorry,
Solicitor?
no, there are
That's okay.
too many moving things.
Can a motion be tabled when it is brought up by another member of the commission, even though they have not put it on the agenda? Can a motion be made to table that?
A motion can be made to table an agenda item and how then it can be voted on. If there's a procedural issue, it'll go to the chairman. The fundamental driving issue of any motion taken at a public meeting is whether or not it's clear what the actual motion was and what the votes were. So that's what's going to end up controlling no matter what we do at the end of the day. We don't have specific bylaws that set forward specific rules for how we function. We don't even have a default back to anything like Robert's rules. So underneath the Open Meetings Act, my primary concern is always clarity. Right now, I have my understanding of the travel of the meeting was that there was an initial item that was called. As that was called, prior to discussion on this specific item, there was a question as to whether or not it was appropriate to be considered, as it didn't fall within the general procedure of how it had worked so far. Some discussion was following on that front, at which point in time there was a motion to move an agenda item up. I believe the motion intended to move agenda item D up, which was specifically identifying Malcolm Moore, that there was some discussion that followed that. At that point in time, that motion was then withdrawn. So what we are in the midst of a discussion on agenda item B. And the content and tenor of that discussion so far has been whether or not agenda items D, B, and C should be heard this evening. We haven't gotten to an end result on that. So I don't have a motion on the floor. Procedurally speaking, I believe it's appropriate for us to continue to discuss agenda items B and C. If someone did want to make a motion to take an item out of order, they could also do that.
So a motion to table is not in order now for that one item. I'm saying the one item because only one, Dylan, one item on the agenda was called, the first one,
So
by the clerk.
if someone wished to have a motion to table item B, they could do so.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Through the chair, are we tabling this to the end of the meeting after Malcolm's presentation, or are we tabling it to a later date? Just,
I'll ask, again, for the way I see it, but I'll ask for clarification from the solicitor. When a motion is tabled, it reverts to the next meeting or when it's called up again. And you can hold it, you can hold the tabled motion until somebody brings it back up.
No,
Or you can request
the-
it to go to the next.
no.
For the mover and the second,
Yeah.
if the mover and second want to specify if this is to move it to the end of the meeting or to move it to the following meeting, either would be appropriate.
Can I suggest, for the sake of clarity and for time, for Director Moore, that if the intent is to move up his agenda item, that we could just have a motion to move up his agenda item. If you want to table these, then a motion to table the meeting. Just some clarity on this motion. I'm not sure what the intention is.
If the seconder will remove your second, I will.
Sure.
All right, I will move it to, I will ask that it be moved to the end of the meeting, even though I have questions on it, but I understand what you're doing, and we can certainly discuss it at the end of the meeting. And that's maybe when I'll make a motion to table. But I will, because I need more information on that motion, on that agenda item. So I will make the motion to table to the end of the meeting.
Is that B and C?
Yeah, well, C hasn't been brought up. Is that appropriate, Dylan?
You can move
All right.
B and C to.
I'll move B and C to the end. Do you also at the same time want me to make a motion to
For tonight.
move Malcolm up,
Back tonight.
Yeah.
to move that item up, or do you want to wait for that?
The current form of the motion would accomplish that. So we're going to move
Okay.
agenda items B and C to the position after agenda item E. That would effectively put us at agenda item D, which is Malcolm Moore. I have a motion. I believe there was a second. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Any opposed? Motion passes.
So, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that that would bring us to agenda item D.
Yep, next item.
Malcolm Moore, Director of Finance, recommendations by the administration concerning matters of finance in the charter and response to questions by the commission.
Malcolm, do you have recommendations? Because I wasn't sure if you do. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to address them specifically. I will say, for what it's worth, we met for several hours the other day, and we haven't finished yet. We have scheduled a follow-up meeting. We have a series of recommendations based on that initial meeting. The finance director is certainly able to discuss them in more detail than I can.
And so these changes, is that for Articles 4 and 5, so Department of Finance and Budget, or
just Article 4.
Move through 4 and 5.
Yeah. So I brought my original ones. I'm not sure what we agreed on or not.
That works.
There was a couple items as I was going through here. When the Budget Commission was here, Section 4.1, subsection 2. The department shall be organized into the following divisions or offices. Controls and accounts, treasury, assessment, and purchasing. We've really moved those around a number of times, but the final, the way it sits right now is that you've got the controls or the accounting department. You've got tax collection instead of treasury. You still have assessment. So we have tax assessment, tax collection, controls or accounting, and then purchasing. There used to be a purchasing agent and a purchasing clerk. The clerk's duties were moved into the accounting department, and then they downgraded the purchasing.
Malcolm, is it okay if we do the Q&A first? And
That's fine.
Go on.
Okay.
Because I just had, and I don't know, Manny, if you want to take point on this, but get some clarification on the audit. I don't know if you have the language in front of you, but because I know the city's audit process is unique because of where our fiscal year is, and I think the language that's in the charter is a little bit constricting. Where it says, this is Article 2, Section 2-15, Paragraph 2. If the council shall fail to provide for an independent audit not later than the close of any fiscal year, the proper officers of the state concerned with municipal audits hereby are authorized to conduct such audit, and the city clerk shall notify the state in writing, and such audit is authorized to be conducted under the provisions of the charter.
What section is that?
215.
It's the second paragraph.
Yeah, I must have an old one. Mine's 215 says canvassing.
Do you want a newer charter?
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Because I'm just a little, and I know because of the state of our fiscal year, it results in our audit being delayed. So the way that the charter language reads to me, I'm not sure if this section of the charter is just redundant because it's just saying the state is authorized to do something.
Yes, and the way I would read it is the first sentence, the council, if they fail to provide for an independent audit, I think that maybe they haven't selected an auditor. They haven't provided for one. But this is really driven by the Auditor General's office. He's very specific on, we go out to bid for every 3 years, and we send the specifications to him. He'll check it off. So every time we do anything, we open the bid. Once we have a recommendation, we have to go to the Auditor General to make sure that's meets with his approval, that it's a legitimate auditing firm. And so they're the ones that really do that. I'm not sure if that. And the council doesn't normally pick the independent auditor, as far as I know, in 20 years. Normally, we go out and do an RFP for it. And then you get the auditing companies, you go through the bid process. And then once that's done, it would,
you got to go to the Auditor General. And then since it's more than X amount, we'd have to have the mayor's approval. And if it meets the threshold, it would come here.
All right, other questions on the audit? Not yet.
So,
Can,
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question. So our finance director is saying that it happens differently than it's read in the charter. Did I hear him correctly? Because shouldn't the charter be amended to the language that the way it happens, shouldn't it be reflected in the language of the charter?
okay.
This is good.
Yeah. So I think it's an excellent question. It's something that we were dealing with a lot in our workshop. There's a lot of sections of the charter that they use about 200 words where 10 would have done, and trying to cut through exactly what the practice is to make sure that the charter and the practice are lined up correctly and the practice stands up to things like whatever the Auditor General needs them to be. So I do anticipate submitting language to this commission, which includes changes like that. But yes, that exact question and concern is something we're looking at.
So again, I'm saying this to the rest of the commission members because we have Malcolm here. It doesn't specifically have to be like we go line by line through this if we want to jump around. And also, the next section is Article 5, which is the budget. If you have questions on the budget that you want to ask him to, feel free. Malcolm knows the budget. He's working on it now, so.
Yes.
But, one question I know that I have is, so in Article 4, Section 4-4, numbers 5 and 6, it says that one of your duties is to submit to the council through the mayor a monthly statement of all receipts and disbursements in sufficient detail to show the exact financial condition of the city. And the next one is prepare for the mayor at the end of the fiscal year a complete financial statement and report. So I don't, one, is that something that's done? And two, if it's not, is there, in your opinion, a need for it? Because in my experience working for the city, these were things that would just be made available to the mayor and council upon request.
As for 5, you're right, they're available. They could be, we could get to the council or anybody that wanted them on request. Right now, after the first couple of months of the year, we will send to the council for the second meeting of each month a listing of expenditures and revenues. Now, I'm not sure they'd be able to tell, it says insufficient detail so that they know what the current state is. If you just say we've spent 4 months worth, you don't know if that's good or bad. But I mean, we do send them a report of all the expenses and revenues to date. And as I tell everybody, the biggest variable is your tax collections. And you collect 75% in the July and September quarters. So, and July being by far the largest, you collect 50% in that one quarter. So you don't know until August how your collections are looking. And that kind of determines everything. So, you may be looking good, but that revenue, I mean, if you're off 1%, that's $1 million. But we do that. You could say, instead of submit, you could have, the council could request it monthly, if they request it. Because a lot of times I give it to them and I don't think they've had a question yet. But I give it to them because, you know, they should be entitled to it. They could ask for it too if they wanted to, but
Yeah, just curious.
And for 6, you know, as of the end of the year, you know, by the end of October, do I give him a complete financial statement? No. But, you know, you're waiting to see how all the revenues you get expenditures that come in November, sometimes December, that are accrued back. So normally, even with the auditors, we wait till January to start closing the books. And at that point, we could give a pretty good estimate where we are. And I give him estimates. I don't think we give him anything formal, but I'll sit down with him and say, hey, I think this is what we're looking at.
Malcolm, thank you for
You're welcome.
being so patient with us here. Section 418, TANs. Just a question for your perspective, please. Right now, the limit is 80% of the taxable property, of the taxes due, excuse me. Is that percentage, are you comfortable with that percentage? Is it too high or is it low? What's your perspective on that?
80% I would say is high because the taxes are, say, 100 million.
Mhm.
And again, we run out of money every December, January, February, somewhere in that time frame. And it has been as high as 30 or 40 million. And that'll probably grow a little bit, but I don't see it getting to 80%, but I'm not sure what I'd bring it down to.
Yeah.
I mean, you could bring it down a little to 60, but
My concern was if let's say it is 80% in February or March, you're looking towards June, right? And is that too brief a period to be able to make it up and accrue enough cash to pay off the TAN?
well, you know, what it says, the anticipation of taxes in an amount not to exceed 80% of the taxes due for that fiscal year. So at the beginning of the fiscal year, for the tax levy, we're sending up tax bills for 100, 110 million. So that would be what I would base the 80% on. And then we got to do a cash flow that we send to our fiscal advisors and bond attorney and to make sure that we meet certain parameters set forth by them. And normally we'll draw the money down, like I said, December, January, February. It's always due at the end of July because that's our big collection quarter. So we always have the money to pay it back then.
And follow that up with 422. Now, I just, I was taken by surprise by the unlimited that the city can levy ad valorem taxes. That, it's like that would be, in my opinion, that's a supplemental tax bill to make up the difference. Is that?
It could be. I mean, normally you'll go to bond and you'll set it up to where you'll structure it so it'll be in the next year's budget so you can plan for it. And there is a cap. The state has a law that says it's 3% of your net assessed value, which would be approximately 120 million. Of course, there are exemptions. If it's a special act, it would not fall under that. But what, is there a limit that we could, I guess we could continue to go over, but eventually you can't afford it. So and the bond rating agencies are going to say, you got too much debt.
That's what I thought when I saw the term unlimited. Just caught my eye.
And again, if you're going out to bond, it has to be a referendum question. You know, high school, middle school. And then some of those get to be tricky because it looks like you have an awful lot of debt, 190 million for the,
It's reimbursable.
but you're getting, 75% of that back from the state. So that's, it looks bad, but then, well, on this side, you've got a huge offset.
Absolutely. Thank you for your clarification.
You're welcome.
So, I have a question for, again, jumping around for 4-7, and I don't know if this is for Malcolm or for Dylan, but this is the part where it makes that exception where it says at the request of the mayor and within the last 3 months of the budget year, the council may by resolution transfer any unencumbered appropriation balance or portion thereof from one office, department, or agency to another. No transfer shall be made from the appropriations required by subsections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of Article 5, Section 8 of this charter. So, my listed on that number 12 of those sections is capital budget, capital items. So my question is what the context of required is, because we have how one of the things that I would really like to clarify or fix in this charter is that right now in the budget process, when you have the mayor submits his budget, he submits it with a listing of capital projects that he'd like and how to fund them. City council can choose whether or not to fund those projects, but also can just approve a pot of money or can insert new capital projects at the same time. Once the budget's passed during the year, if there's a surplus, I'll call it a surplus amount of money that's in that pot in the capital budget, they can choose to either approve those projects that they didn't approve already out of that pot of money, or if they wanted to use that for some other project that they wanted, they can take it out of that pot. So my question is, would, under the way that the charter is now, when it says no transfers shall be made from the appropriations required by subsections, and it's listing capital on the charter, would that hamstring would they be able to take out money from a project that has had funding that was approved but hasn't been spent?
Where would they transfer it to? To another project?
Yeah.
Well, I think you can do that. I think they're talking here is that you can't transfer from one department or agency to another. And no transfer shall be made from capital. So you can't transfer from capital to, say, finance. So, and under the budget section, it actually says once the money is transferred into the capital fund, that can only be used for capital items. So it's a little redundant. I mean, there's another section in here.
So I'm just, that makes sense. So I guess what I'm saying is like, if the mayor puts in, I don't know, an item for I don't know, for an item X, he funds it at $10,000 and the council approves that, but no steps have been taken to actually fund it yet or to move on the project. And, the council decides they want to do a different project. Can they transfer the money from that item that they already approved, but that money hasn't been spent, and transfer that to spend it on a new item that they just,
They're doing it. They did it last night, as a matter of fact, for 2 items. There were two items, one for 150,000, one for 50, that said it was budgeted here. We don't think we're going to do it. We want to move it up here. And they did it by ordinance.
Yeah. Ordinance, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not, you don't have to weigh in on this, Malcolm. It's my personal opinion. I have a major problem with that. I think that circumvents the process. The council at the end of the day controls the purse strings. But that's a way to get around the budgeting process. I think that's, for lack of a better term, the council can use that as a slush fund. So that's something, I don't know if the commission wants to agree with me on it, then that's fine. But I would like to work with the solicitor on crafting language that would involve the council. If they want capital projects specifically, that's fine. But to have that submitted when the budget is submitted, so prior to, like,
The goal to prevent the creation of new capital projects. Is the goal to prevent the creation of new capital projects outside of the budget process?
yeah, so if the council wants to spend $10,000 on a new project, that's fine. But they would have to do it when the budget is still being made. At the same time, which the council does with their own budget, their own department budget that they have, they submit that beforehand, or when the mayor submits his budget to the council. It would be the same thing where they prepare their capital budget, items they want to spend on projects beforehand. Might introduce an ordinance for capital project when it's, in the middle of the year, that's their right, but that would be for the next fiscal year.
Because they're also, not only are they moving money from this project to this, is that, let's say we've got 3 million unallocated. And whether it's the mayor or the council, will say, well, we've got a project now for $50,000, which is above and beyond even what was in the budget. So if you're going to shut them down from changing, you want to make sure then they can't just, well, okay, well, I won't move it from A to B, I'll just make a new line item.
So I guess what I'm trying to argue is, if I'm the administration, I have to go through the process. Not only do I have to propose projects through putting the budget together, and then the council can choose to approve it or not approve it, but I'm going and getting estimates beforehand on how much this project's going to cost. Same thing as if the project's approved, I'm going to have to go through, if it's DPW, you're going to have to get site surveys, all that fun stuff. But if the council is saying, oh, I want to do, this project here, I want to take, $10,000, $100,000, whatever it is for this project. What I'd like to prevent from them doing that is, where do you get that number from? You don't have, when the mayor's putting his budget together, he has department heads who are coming up with those numbers. When the council's doing that, when they're taking that money from a pot of money that is supposed to be used for other projects, they're reallocating funds.
You could have it like a dual system, that one can't approve it. You have to have the approval of both. So it'd have to be sort of with the recommendation of the mayor and the approval of the council. Would be.
I'm not even arguing that.
I think I see what it is. So we're actually going to do a lot with capital because there's advertising nightmares. And in order to figure out how to allocate capital, I have a binder that I reference in order to sort out the different sections of the charter. But if I understand the general concept, what I would look at doing is drafting some language for the commission's review, which would be something to the effect of the allocation of a prerequisite to the allocation of capital includes, and we'll go through the same process for both parties, which is sort of a department head review and recommendation. And I actually think the planning board also voices its position on capital as a part of the budget process each year. So the one thing I would say, I don't know that we want to lock it into a time frame. You can only do it during this small window of time because there may be different things that either the mayor or the council wants to spend money on because an opportunity arises outside of the budget cycle. But to force it to go through the same exact system where it's vetted by department heads, goes through planning, so that a prerequisite to the allocation of any capital is these two other checks in the system, which I think is the other thing that Malcolm was getting at, is to have both parties having a check on the other. That system is kind of built into the budget process. So to have all allocation of capital function according to the budget process, but not necessarily limiting it to like this 90-day window per year, I think we could definitely put something together like that.
And also, the way it stands right now is the department submitted to planning, they put a 5-year plan together. They come to me and say, how much money do we think we have? I talk to the mayor, we give them a ballpark number. They work on it with the mayor's office. Then they go to the planning board to get it approved. The mayor will say yay or nay to that. And then once it goes to the council can say yay or nay, and the council can actually add their own items. So, that's also happening. So during the budget process, well, I want to add 10,000 for Little League fields. And so, they'll put it on and approve it. And then again, that would be part of the budget.
Through the chair. Malcolm, if a project is proposed and it does not come to fruition, where does that money go now?
Just a brief history on how the money gets there. Your revenues, let's say it's 100 million, you can only budget 99 million of that. There's always supposed to be a 1% difference. And so in theory, at the end of the year, you're gonna have $1 million surplus. Once your fund balance gets so large, which we've met, then it rolls into capital. And that stays in capital. So if there's a project that for $100,000 that after 2 years, we say, hey, it's just not gonna work. That was another thing, is we need to have a mechanism to say, it's just gonna unallocate it, and then it goes back into the kitty, which can be allocated next budget cycle.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question for the solicitor. Dylan, is there any state law that is protocol for capital? Like, do we have something that supersedes our charter right now when it comes to the spending of capital?
Just the Municipal Purchasing Act, which would be the RFP process, lowest qualified bidder, all those sorts of standards for the performance of work. But Malcolm, unless there's something I'm not aware of off the top of my head, capital is generally controlled by the local budget process.
Correct.
Thank you.
And I know that you're gonna suggest this. I'm sure you'll suggest this at some point, but when we do get to the language for the budget timeline, I'm just going to strongly encourage everyone to be on board with adding in that language that the approval takes place, and we put in that language about the veto.
We have had a long discussion about that.
So there's no
We're reorganizing that. One of the other things we're reorganizing is, I think we actually talked about a good deal with ordinances in general, how posting would work, how advertising would work, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to simplify that pretty substantially because all of this was drafted prior to the internet. So the availability of this information automatically on the city's website, I think, will significantly reduce the burdens on the council in terms of scheduling. Right now, for what it's worth, the way scheduling works is it's 48 hours worth of business days, not including some weekends and holidays, plus the variable of when the local newspapers accept ads for certain time periods. So you basically need an abacus in order to figure out when you need language by. and we're gonna make it work better.
And then, and I guess another question to ask is, when looking at the budget timeline too, I know it's the 45 days. How exactly does that factor in? I know I should know this, but how exactly does that factor in with the school department's budget? Because don't you reach a point where the school department is making their budget and the city's making their budget, and they kind of have to come together at one point, and then it goes off to the council?
Yes. And that,
Instead of the process of, school has their budget. Is it, school's what, 46, 47% of the city's total budget? So I'm thinking about it, not in terms of logistics, just thinking about when the mayor's making his budget, he needs to factor in the costs of the school.
and that's a little bit of a concern right now because I think the mayor has to submit his budget to the council 70 days. I think it used to be 45, they changed it to 70, which means it has to be this year by August 23rd. And the school committee just passed their budget. And so the city's 3/4 the way through theirs. And you're trying to say, what are you going to ask for? And they'll tell us, but again, it's an estimate on their part because they haven't had approval yet. And I think they just got it approved last week. And so that gets to be kind of an issue that it's, we're trying to figure out, do we have to make cuts? Because we can only raise taxes, say $4 million. And the school came in and asked for $2 million. And so, you're sitting there saying, oh, it looks like we got plenty of room. And now all of a sudden, wait a minute, we're over budget by $500,000 or something. So it's just the timing of it is there's not, by the time the school approves theirs, if that's when we started ours or partially through, we'd be behind the 8 ball trying to get it done by the 70-day rule.
So would there, and I don't even know with Title 16 if this is something that we could do, but would there be a way that we could set up the budget process so that we could have the school department submit the budget earlier?
I would think so. In most communities, the people are done with their budgets by April, and then it's voted on if you have a finance town meeting in May. So I don't know what their rule is of when they need to have their budget submitted by.
I know they have to wait on a lot of things from the state. I don't know, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, well, because of the unusual fiscal year and negotiations of contracts, let's suppose, which this is not true, okay? But, the school committee this year settled their contract very early, which gave them some time to be able to figure out what their expenses are going to be in the next fiscal year. But if they were still in negotiations, how could they allocate or anticipate? Then that's all it would be, anticipation.
Well,
Because until that contract with whichever bargaining unit it is, but let's say it's the teachers, which is the largest one, that's the tail that wags the dog of their budget. And they are waiting until the last moment before they can see what their salary expenses are going to be. Because until that contract is settled, they're dealing with an unknown. So that's a variable. And again, it's the problem with, our unusual fiscal year, which means that's when our contracts take effect, November 1.
On the city side, we've had that same problem for this current budget and last budget, is that you've got a contract that has not been settled. So now you get into, well, look, we're going to have to estimate. What do we think? And, again, you could be right, you could be wrong. But all you can do is say, hey, at this point in time, based on history or what you've seen, we're going to give them 2% or 3% or whatever that number is. And then you got to say, okay, that equates to X amount of dollars and, put it in a legal reserve or a contingency line item.
At least the school department now is aware of what their state allocation is going to be prior to their budget. So, that's a positive. They know that it's locked in because the state budget takes effect July 1. But the city budget on the November 1, that's a
It does create problems.
Gordian knot, yeah.
Actually, it creates more for the school than it does for the city.
Yes, I wasn't necessarily proposing that we do something. I was just trying to think if there was a way to become more efficient with it. But
I think this time of year, everything always collapses, doesn't it, Malcolm? It's like telescopes. The days seem to get shorter and the weeks get shorter.
Well,
Every time you have a budget proposal.
right,
budget
and then
meeting.
originally, the budget had to be approved 7 days before the end of the fiscal year, but then maybe we had to go back 14 days before that, I think, because of this veto power. And so you start from there, but before you have your first public hearing, I've got to go to the state and have an ad, which they approve, and then it's got to go in the paper for so many days. So, you kind of work back and say, how many public hearings do you think you're going to have? And normally we say 2 and kind of work back from there. And some of that's, the charter has different language, but it's got to be superseded by the state law. And so when we talked to the solicitor, he was saying, well, maybe we ought to just put, hey, we're going to follow the state law on this.
It's not quite a binder, but it's a large memo I have on that.
The fund budget, Malcolm, 1% of anticipated general revenue. As a finance person, not the East Providence finance person, but as a finance person overall, is that a sufficient cushion? 1%?
That is a really good thing in the budget. Most communities don't have that.
Mhm.
And when we went through this last time, is that I was saying that when times get tough, the council will normally won't fund the pension or their OPEB that goes with that or capital. And you're just kicking the can down the road. So, this almost forces you, you don't have to spend it, but you're raising money to put over there. And right now it's about 1.3, 1.4. Again, we have a ton of capital needs. If we wanted to raise that up to, go to 1.25, then 1.5 or something, my concern again is that the next few years, we got to put money aside for the middle school. So I got to put another, of the 4 million I can raise, 1.5 million is going to go to that bond. Because the bond's got to be, I got to get $6 million. So I'm trying to put 1.5 million away for the next 4 years. So you get into, we're just not going to have enough money. But if you wanted to say, oh, well, once the bond is paid off or something in a few years, if you ask the planning department, the last, 5, 6, 7 years, it's been at least $2.5 to $3 million. Now, granted, when I got here, they were saying for like the 10 years before, there was no capital. So now that there's money, everybody's got their hand up. But 1% is good. If we could get that up a little bit, it'd be a little bit better. I really don't know what, I haven't really taken a look around to say historically, what would be the number? We think would be sufficient.
What are the increments that the state reimburses on the school aid
For the,
for the bonds?
they will, for school bonds. And it has to be approved by the school, from what, the RIDE Building Committee
Yeah,
or?
it depends pretty significantly on the design of the project. There are certain things they refund at different rates.
I'm aware of that. I'm just
Okay.
curious as to incrementally, how, do you get a check a month reimbursal?
Oh,
Or do you,
Twice a year.
twice a year?
Oh, hang on, is that right? We get the school state aid twice a year. We get it. We get it twice a year. Because if you're going through RIDE, you've got to go through the Rhode Island, Rhinebeck. And so when we pay the bonds, the state sends our money to Rhinebeck, just in case we don't pay the bonds. Once we pay the bonds, then Rhinebeck releases the money back to us. So we get it twice a year.
And that's all bonds?
No, it is only for the bonds having to do with the school department.
Right, that's,
Right, right.
yeah, the
And-
school department bonds.
And even with.
I mean, existing bonds, like, I don't know, maybe the Ken Heights bond is still out there, or maybe that's paid off. But that check would come in coincidentally with the high school.
Yes.
Check.
So you've got, most bonds are 20 years. And what they do is they say, whatever your principal and interest payments are for that year, whatever the rate was, 48% or 52%, you're going to get that for the life of the bond. So they try to match it with, instead of you get a windfall because they were saying, oh, we're just going to give you it in this increment. But if your bonds are declining or inclining, you may get a windfall in there and then be behind the eight ball. But what they did is they just said, okay, here's your bond schedule. So whatever you pay, we're going to give you 50% in that year. And for the high school, it was 54%. And then we got another 20% for, but it wasn't on the whole bond.
Right, it was on 135, right?
Right. And same with the middle school is that we went from 54 to, I think it's 48.5%. We could get up to 68.5, but not on all of it.
Anyway, back to that fund balance. Is 1%, are you comfortable with 1%? Or would you like to see it amended? I'd say 1.25.
Oh, I'd like to see it go up a little bit to maybe 1.25. What we could do is, I'm meeting again with Dylan and administration to go over some of this other stuff. So maybe I can try to do a little research and see if there's an industry standard.
Do it over time.
Insurance is a good thing.
Hmm.
Cushions.
The other question that I have is the tax rate. So the 3.5 that we're at right now, the state is 4%, right?
Yes.
Is there a particular reason that we hamstrung ourselves at 3.5?
Before the last, well, it was when the Charter Commission came in, when the Budget Commission was here. The way it said 3.5% of the tax rate. So right now it's on the levy, so if I got new growth, I got a new building, I got a new something that brought in $500,000, so I could go up, I could increase 4%, but then I could maybe be 4.5% because I get the new growth. And the state said, oh, no, we're not going to give you that anymore. We're going to cap it and say the total amount of your levy, which is 100 million, can only go up 4%. Well, ours said 3.5% of the rate. So it really, but we used to get like $500,000 in new growth. So I said, well, why don't we just go with the state? Because we're really at 4% anyway. And I thought that's what we were going to. And then there was a discussion, I think, when it came to the council, and they said, no, so instead of going up to 3.5% on the rate, which really was like 4, they made it a little more stricter and said, oh, no, we want it 3.5% on the levy. And, that was one of our recommendations, is just go with the state.
If I may, not actually on the question of the tax rate, which I vaguely understand, but not much more detail than that. As a general rule of thumb, anywhere where the state preoccupies what you can do on a local level, my preference is to refer to the state's authority. Because if the state changes the rules and it's something that the city wants to take advantage of, in order to get there, you need to go through a charter amendment. It's just incredibly difficult. So if it's a tax rate or if it's how you perform notice to pass an ordinance, I don't really care that much. I just want, if there's some preoccupation by state law, that the charter reference to the state law so that it functions if anything's ever changed.
Mr. Chairman, the solicitor, so just clarification, so would you want the charter, do you want the charter to reflect what the state supersedes city? So do you, would your wish be for it to reflect the state, or do you want it to just note the state? Because
Shall comply with all applicable state law is my kind of go-to clause.
Oh.
I think it's not a state law versus charter question, but it is a charter versus local ordinance question, which is the same phenomenon. There's a hierarchy of law. I think my office spent a good chunk of March and April just trying to figure out the differences between certain sections of the charter updates, which occurred 5 years ago, and to make us code compliant in that area. So there was a 5-year gap, and it was legitimately months of work in order to actually sort that out. The hierarchy of law changes are actually very complicated to fix. You kind of have to figure out what portion of it actually doesn't match. You don't really want to change more than that, because then you're delving from compliance with law into a policy shift, and it's just difficult. And if all you do is, to your point, instead of citing the law and writing it out, just refer to, there's a controlling state law here, we'll be compliant with it. I think that's valuable.
is that important for us to know if we need to change language to make it read what the state says or to add that clause. So thank you.
Yeah, I see right now that where we are financially as a city, whether it's just a bad, it happens to be not, there are good things going on in the city in terms of economically, we are very prosperous right now, but at time in terms of the amount that our bills are coming to pay at the same time. So that 3.5 is really hamstringing us right now.
Case in point with the middle school, if we waited until construction was done and said, I've got to come up with $5 million. Well, the charter said you can't. Well, I know, but the voters voted for this new middle school. They know it's going to cost money. We told them how much it was going to cost. And so everybody gave the approval, but the charter says, oh, nope, you're over the charter. You can't do it. So that's one of the issues you'll run into.
Or if there's an international credit crisis again.
So, does anybody else have questions?
Dylan, do you have a anticipated date of arrival for this?
I didn't catch that.
I don't. I think Marlene reached out for all of us to have the second half of that meeting, and hopefully it's the second half, not a middle third of the meeting sometime next week. I think maybe it was sometime next week. The challenge has been in all candor, the workload in the solicitor's office, it's backed up the language drafting. This language drafting takes, you can't do like 20 to 30 minutes here, 20 or 30 minutes the next day. You need to block off like 6 straight hours and just go deep into it. And we haven't been able to do that yet. That being said, I do want to reassure the Charter Commission that between the excellent minutes, notes, video recording, we're not missing anything. I've got a stack like this on the back corner of my desk. I know that Mike has been working on the stack that I've already submitted to him, but I don't have an estimated turnaround. I do have an estimated, hopefully, follow-up and final meeting to try to sort out what the recommendations need to be for the before the end of next week. But that's not meaningful until I can actually write the language. I don't have a time frame on that.
Through the chair. Malcolm, I know this is a hot button issue. And I'm not sure I need you to go into great detail, but could you at least address the importance of having the fiscal and physical year match and how that affects the budget, how it would help or not help with budgetary process, and also how much you would, how long that would take and how much you would anticipate that would cost taxpayers yearly?
Well, I know the school would be on board with it. We actually had it approved when the Budget Commission was here. We had money set aside for it. We just couldn't keep a manager long enough to get it done. And when we finally got someone here, then the school's like, we need a new high school. And because I was thinking I was going to have to borrow close to 40 million, and I already had 10 to 15 in the kitty. So we were going to need somewhere between 40 and 50 million. And so we used that money for the new high school and to pay the bonds, because I had like 3 million in the budget. So if I needed 5, I only had to go up 2, not the whole 5. It would help the school tremendously because you go from 7/1 to 6/30. We start at 10/31, so they've got September and October in the middle of the school year in the current budget. And so when they're trying to do a budget, they're, oh, wait a minute, I've got to take, 7 months of this and then 2 more here. The state reporting's difficult. We have problems on the motor vehicle phase out. We'll have a problem where they're trying to phase out the tangibles. One of the issues you face is that we don't know when we do the budget, you know what the state budget's going to be through to the following June, but not July, August. So what happened one year is we got distressed community aid from the state, $800,000. We've been getting that year after year. When they did their budget, we fell under the threshold. It went away. So in August, I had budgeted $800,000. Well, the state said you're not getting it. So it went to 0. So all of a sudden I got an $800,000 hole in the budget. And so those are some of the challenges you have. When you talk to the rating agencies, everybody's like, why is your budget late? Well, our year end is 4 months later than everyone else's. Now, we're the only one like that, probably in the country.
In your expert opinion, is this the wrong time to do it because of the bonds that we have out there, the high school, and now we're getting into the junior high and so forth? Is that not the right time to make this coincide these dates?
Yeah, I don't know how you could do that because we're going to be bumping up the tax cap for the next few years. Like I said, I'm going to try to put an extra 1.5 million in for 4 years. So after that, you may have a little room. I keep saying, I really think you're going to have to wait 15 years until the high school bond drops off. Because then when it drops off, you could do the bond because you've already got that budgeted, that $5 million or whatever that number is. But trying to do it beforehand, I mean, we could look at it, but I wouldn't look at it for at least 4 or 5 years. And the problem is if you do that, you're at 4% or 3.5% or 4% for the next few years. You'd like to go down to a couple for a few years to give the taxpayers a break. But if you do this, you're going to be butting up against that cap again.
And Malcolm, I was on the Budget Commission when we did that. It was done by putting it into the capital budget. Am I correct in saying that? It was called a slush fund in essence, but it was put in for, only to be used for capital projects. And that's how the city councils of the future or after that mission were able to take it and move it into the other
Well,
areas?
It was the bond synchronization fund is what we called it. And because I had said when we redid the budget, there was say it was $4 million a year in the budget that was supposed to go to synchronization to pay the bonds. We just couldn't get the bonds done. So every year I had like $4 million that went in to reserve to the bond synchronization, 4, 8, 12, we were up to like 15, $16 million. And when they decided that we're going to build the high school, well, so when the fund balance, let's say there was $30 million, 15 of it was for the general fund, 15 million of it was for the synchronization. Well, they said, well, then synchronization is going to go away. Well, then the fund balance said, oh, it's now got 30 million of unencumbered. So per the charter, anything over 15 million rolls into capital. So then all of a sudden 15 million just rolled into capital in one lump sum. And the council said, oh, $10 million, we're going to do roads. And so.
Just wanted a clarification on that. Thank you, Malcolm.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Malcolm. So as far as this charter commission, when we're looking at the language to propose, is there a way, and I would need Dylan to help me with this one too, is there a way for us to like have some type of language that says that that line item needs to be back, like that bond sync fund, and that we at least start putting money into that to try to help the taxpayers? I mean, even if it's a percentage or something, is that even possible?
Yes, I would think, just like you've got 1% for capital. So at the end of the year, you've got 1%. If you think the bond is going to cost $5 million a year, let's say, well, then every year you put $1 million in and then another $1 million. So in year 2, it'd be $2 million, then $3 million, then $4 million. So by year 5, you've got enough to go to bond. But, that takes some planning, just with the tax rates and how do we get there?
Dylan, is it possible, like, if we were to, like, with the language, instead of just saying, like, because Malcolm pointed out that 1.5 would be better than 1 million for that.
Mhm.
Is there a way of doing it where would be to keep it at the 1 million, but put the 0.5 for bond sync? Is that a possibility?
I know what you're getting at. So basically to have a provision that there's an increase to the fund balance, but that's only after we come into sync. So the increased percentage that goes into savings as a general concept, yeah, I can write that out.
And like you said, you'd have, say, 1% go to capital and then 0.5% go into. Yes.
Bond sync fund, and then when that is done, then that would roll back into capital. So then it would be that one. So it wouldn't change the 1.5, but it would allocate it differently.
Mhm.
Just a suggestion.
Through the chair. We're talking about a one-time expense, right, Malcolm, when this synchronization does take effect? That would be borrowing for 1 year.
Oh, no, that'd be a 20-year bond.
It would be a 20-year bond.
You'd have to get a bond synchronization authorization. Yeah, well, let's say you need $50 million to synchronize. Well, if you had $50 million in fund balance, then yes, it'd be a one-time thing. But I don't know how you're going to get 50 million in there. But normally, most everybody else has gone to a bond. And, the bond you can pay off over 20, 25 years.
Through the chair.
Well, it depends on, a lot of it have to do with what you would save in the long run from the TANs. And the main thing, as you point out, is the budget, when the Budget Commission came in, we were running out of money in January and we were junk bond status. We couldn't borrow money. So now you're like, well, how often does that happen? Well, the city almost ran out of money. Well, how, you're not going to pay police and fire and teachers. I mean, you aren't going to pay anybody. So, I think they went to Webster Bank, who gave them like a bridge loan. But, so those things happen. That's the biggest drawback is, what if worst case scenario happened, which happened about 10 years ago.
Malcolm, what exactly does the synchronization do? Does it affect the tax rate? Does it affect, what exactly, whether it takes 20 years or 50 million or whatever, when the dates are synchronized, like they are in, I think, every other city in the state, is that right, Dylan? All the other cities, what does that actually do for the tax rate, for the taxpayers of the city, for the budget, for the finances of the city?
Well, it makes record keeping and reporting easier. Also, you don't have to worry as much about running out of money every year because it's always, well, like we're starting to already dip in for the middle school bond. Well, I wasn't expecting that. And they're saying, oh, we could spend up to 20 million. Well, I was going to go to bond in February. Well, it now may have to be December. So for planning, reporting, as far as the tax rate, I don't think it would change much on the tax rate.
Does it increase your bond rating?
It would help. We run into the problem now with the audit. Because of our odd fiscal year, we can't get information. The audit's supposed to be done by the end of April. But I need information from the state. And because we have the odd fiscal year, we're an outlier. We can't get the information from the state until July, August, September. Well, that's 4 months after it's due. So every year, the rating agencies and all of the banks and anybody we owe money to is like, why can't you get this filed on time? Well, we can't. We can't get the information from the state. Why? Because we have this odd fiscal year. So, you always get these little dings, you're filing late. And, the other way, technically you could file on time, but then you get what they call a qualified opinion, which is a big red flag, which means you're not in conformity with accounting rules. Well, so it's kind of a lose-lose. Do you want a big red flag or do you want to be dinged for late? Because either one. And so when we talked to bond counsel last time, I said, you're better off filing and get a clean audit and file late than file on time and get a red flag that you have to explain to everybody every single time. So there's a lot of advantages financially. Down the road, you'll be savings because, like I said, you're going out to bond for, not bond for TANs for $30 million. Well, right, a couple of years ago, we were getting it for less than 1%, a couple $100,000. Well, this year, I don't know what the rate will be, but it could be 6% on $30 million. Now, all of a sudden, you got, we were only budgeting for 500. It could be $1 million. So once you do this, you will never pay TANs again. We've been paying TANs for 50 years. So realistically, you were better off to bite the bullet years ago because, but they're the same thing we are. Well, but we need the money for other things. All right, but you're going to be, it's like, it'd be nice to pay your house off because you never have to pay it again. But under this scenario, you're always refinancing. You're never paying that house off.
Any other questions?
No.
All right, Malcolm, I think you're off the hook,
All right, well,
unless you want to,
thank you for listening. Hope I answered your questions satisfactorily.
I was going to say, I know you have your suggestions, but I think we'll wait until the binder is compiled.
That makes sense. Why piecemeal? We'll get together and he can just come up with, hey, here's because as I went through this, I'm like, oh, I found a few more in here that we didn't bring up, so.
I think it's gonna have to be more than an inch binder.
Yeah.
One of the wide binders.
But
Okay.
no, thank you, Malcolm.
Good, thank
Okay,
you.
all right.
Okay. Next item? Which, yeah, it's E.
Schedule of special meeting.
So I had placed this on here because I figured that we would be spending this meeting essentially doing what we just did, and then seeing if we wanted to get together next week, vote on changes that we haven't been voting on, but if the solicitor's office is still waiting to get changes done, then
I think what I'll do is I will try to, what's a week from Friday? What's that date? 25th, thank you. I will try to send a written update to the chair on the 25th on all outstanding language. I believe that 25th date includes the time frame I just got from Marlene on being able to have the last half of that meeting. If not, I'll let everyone know. But regardless, on the 25th, I'll give a written update to the chair on the status of all language.
So that being the case, I don't think then that we need to have a special meeting next week, but wondering what I can get a feel for people once we do get all the changes. We want to have a special meeting just to go through the changes and vote on them, because there will be a lot of them, and it'll be a little tedious, and that way we don't have to spend 3 hours of having a regular meeting just to do our usual business and then vote on each and every change, especially if we're going to get a binder of budget recommendations.
Could we, through the chair, would it be possible to get the recommended changes in hand before that meeting so that we could review them? I think that would make the meeting go a lot quicker. Even if they're just available here, we can come in and pick them up. Nobody has to, I'm not looking for any delivery or anything, but.
The only concern I have is the meeting date. So on the 25th, I'll give an update on the status of the language. That does not mean I'm giving the language. I will endeavor to give the language by the 25th, but I'm not the only cog in that machine. I'm really reliant on a lot of other people and their expertise in order to get that done. So I don't know when to schedule the special meeting for relative to the availability of the language. If we set a date for a special meeting right now, I don't know what language I can give you.
Yeah, I don't think that it would be a wise decision to schedule a special meeting right now. But we have other options too. If it's going to be a situation where the solicitor's office, because of manpower, is going to be backed up, we could always do things when we go through sections of the charter. We could always do provisional voting on ideas that we like as we go through it, and then that would give the solicitor's office time to draft the language, and then we could have a special meeting at some point down the line, and then they could give us in advance all those language changes, and we could just pass them in one meeting. So it depends how we do this. I know that there's realistic constraints that we have to adapt to with the manpower issue.
And I appreciate your patience. It's been wonderful, but I too want this off my desk.
Sound good? Okay. Next item, which is going back to B.
Turning to section B, discussion and vote for partisan elections, John Farrier.
Mr. Faria?
When it comes to partisan in the city of East Providence, I'm a firm believer of partisan in the city of East Providence. But of course, I respect any opinion of the commissioners. It's been too many times, and I think most of us have been involved in the political scene, that candidates run. And they're not Democrats. They hide their affiliation. And what I say is, be proud of your affiliation if you're the Democrat, if you're a Republican, or independent. But we have a situation now that there's a lady and a gentleman in Ward 1, who just lost elections against our current councilman, and now he's the head of the Republican Party. And somebody else is, so they establish this, which is okay. But what I come from is, what I believe is, be proud of your affiliation, file as whatever you are, Republican, Democrat. You know, it's simple when you run for the Senate or when you run for the House. As a matter of fact, there's a special elections coming up because David Cicilline obviously left. You have, I think, about 12, 14 candidates, Democrats running. One's going to go to the wire. And then, of course, the opposite party, they have, I think, 2 or 3 candidates that they're going to have the elections, their primary. Then it's going to be the 2. Here is, I don't care if it's the council. And being chairman of the party for a long time, I don't care if it's the mayor or the, and when you're talking about the mayor or the city council or the school committee, we've seen 3 Democrats running for the council. And then the front one has to run with a runner-up. It happens on the city of East Providence with a nonpartisan type of government. The same thing that we had elections for the mayor. And it's important to understand that we win the elections over 50%, but he still has to run the second runner-up. But at least if we get that out of the way, whoever runs as a Democrat, and it's fine if you have a Republican, or if you have a Democrat running on a general election. There's nothing wrong with that. I think because of the fact that we have changed, and we cannot forget, we have changed the mayor form of government. And when I met back then with the council who was smart enough to put the question on the ballot, to have a mayor form of government in the city. The plan was to put but we were concerned. Let's go one step at a time. At least if you have the mayor first and then down the road, and I think we voted, by the way, on the last charter commission that we had. We voted, and I know who was in favor, who was against, but it failed by 1 vote, but it's okay. I mean, we just left it the way it is. Now, we're here with the committee. We're here again with the charter, and so I'm proposing this. I'll answer any questions because the way it is written is, it's not to discuss, it's to discuss and vote. Normally, that's the way it's done, okay? So I don't know if you got any concerns. I'd be glad to answer any concerns that you have. I know that you have some beliefs. I remember, and Val, correct me if I'm wrong, we already had voted, and Val came to the meeting and said, because of the fact that we have the mayor form of government, that it should be partisan. And you know, everybody worked hard collectively. We lost by 1-1. We shook hands, and it's over. I mean, that's just the way it is. I think it's important, and I understand loud and clear that some of the council, and I'm not going to mention no names, are opposed. That's okay. But you got so much time. They may see the light and pressure from the voters of the city of East Providence that that's the direction to go. But not supporting that because you have some of the council members who do not support, but it's wrong. So With that being said, I can run forever. I mean, it doesn't take that long time to make that presentation. It bothers me personally. Running a lot of elections in the city of East Providence, being ahead of your organization, and seeing folks who are Republicans from the opposite party run the Democrats because it's easy to get elected. Please, all you just be proud of your affiliation. Be proud of what you are. Run, don't hide. So if there's no discussion, I'll make the motion, but I'll make the motion to change the elections on the city of East Providence from nonpartisan to partisan.
I'll second for purposes of discussion.
I will make, excuse me, I'm sorry.
You made the motion?
Yeah, but I'll make a motion as it's very clear, is to change the election form of government on the city of East Providence from nonpartisan to partisan.
I'll second for purposes of discussion.
There's a motion on the floor. There's a second. Can we get a roll call vote?
Don't we have discussion?
I'm sorry, discussion.
Yeah. All right, if I may go forward, is that okay? Thank you. My question's mostly for the solicitor procedural. The partisan government or partisan elections are separate in the charter for each office. Should we not do that? Or you probably don't want to answer this, but I think it's more appropriate to do those as those position comes up, as we've agreed on this commission to go forward by going from article to article. So my question is, I guess the real question to you is, can this be done as one blanket vote, or should it not be done for each of those portions of the charter that affect each of the offices?
You can do it as one blanket vote. I will have to, when I actually draft the language to meet whatever it is that the commission votes to kind of accomplish, I'll have to go through the entirety of the charter to make sure that I catch each portion.
Okay. And the other point I want to make is that when Commissioner Tavares brought up the fact that, and this probably isn't for you, Dylan, it's probably for the chair and the commission. We voted to table the seven-member council that he brought up on the fact that we would discuss that when that came up in the charter proceeding. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Commissioner? Is that how you understand it, Chairman?
I understood it as we tabled his motion. But that was, again, that was his motion. I operate, again, I know, Bruce, we've had disagreements, but I strongly believe if someone wants to put something on the agenda, I'll put it on the agenda. If the body thinks it doesn't belong on the agenda, then here we can discuss taking it off the agenda. We can vote to do that. That can be a procedural thing. But I just don't want to say, I'm not going to make that call of saying that a member doesn't have something on the agenda.
Gotcha. Understood.
Through the chair?
So this is,
Yeah.
I think I still have the floor. Okay. This is for the solicitor. What do you think the value, well, the value would be to me and to the other commissioners, to do, to get us a report, and you may know right now off the top of your head, if all other cities and towns, or how many other cities and towns have partisan elections? Are there any left that have nonpartisan for these offices? We're talking about mayor, city council, and school committee.
I don't know if it breaks out the same way for each. School committee may be different because there are also appointed school committees, at least one. But other than my vague cognizance of at least one appointed school committee, I can't answer that question right now. I don't know.
Okay. Can I finish? Oh, sorry. My other question is, brings me back to, and this is kind of stretching the issue, but I think I want to bring this up. I think, as I've said before, the way we present this to the city council, now keep in mind we're advisory to the city council. The city council puts on the ballot what they want to put on and how they want to put it on. I think it's very important that when we make our recommendations, which is what we're doing here every meeting, that we suggest to them, and I guess I'm addressing the chair, that we suggest to them that we think they should be separate issues. Because there may be some people who, and I think it comes up more on salary, but there may be some people who don't want the city council election to be partisan, but they have no problem with the mayor's position being partisan. So I think it, and I know they can do what they want to do, but I think, Mr. Chairman, when we present this, and I know it's a hard question to answer now, the Charter Commission would have to weigh in on it, but I would like, hopefully, that we will make the suggestion to the city council to please split items like this separate them so that one person who doesn't want the mayor to be a partisan election or vice versa, and does want the council to be, that they don't vote against the whole package. That's just a statement that I want to make, that I've made
Chairman.
before.
Chairman?
Hold on. Mike, you
We had a little discussion here the last time, and it was confusing when we said to vote up or down. When we're talking about voting up or down, and I thought I understood exactly what you're coming from. It's even this item here. They vote item by item. It's not the whole package. You can't do that. There's certain things that the council, and I understand, I respect the council, they have a job to do. They can modify opposition. So I'm going to go, what my motion is, across the board, partisan for the city of East Palm. Now, can the council modify and say, well, we're going to vote, a resolution, they'll vote on a resolution to place on a ballot, just the mayor. They may say they don't want the council. Because if you have 2 or 3 members of the council currently, and if they're independent, you say, hey, wait a minute, we don't want that. So they can do that. They may decide that they want the school committee, not the council. They have the power to do that. I know that because I wasn't born yesterday. I know that they can do that. So if this committee votes to support the mayor, if that's what you believe, because if you don't believe in partisan, well, don't vote, because I'm hearing here, if I was chairman of the Democratic Party now, I'd be fighting like hell to have. So I'm a little confused.
Well, John, I am the chairman of the Democratic
I'm talking to the
Party.
chairman. I'm talking to the.
Oh, you addressed me. You said that if you were the chairman of the party. So let me answer you. You're misunderstanding
No, I'm not.
what
I'm not misunderstanding. I'm
You're not
confused. That's a little different.
You're confused.
You
Or,
got confused with your position as a chairman. But anyway, they can modify. They can modify the position. Whatever they want, they have the power to do that. So this is very simple. If we vote up or down, if we vote to have partisan, it's submitted to who? To the council. At the right time, we know they have to vote on a resolution. The place on a ballot. They may decide, and that's okay. I just think it's too premature. Because, and I don't want to, I'm not here to bang the city council, because at the end of the day, they've got a job to do, and I got to propose that they increase the salary. That's how much I respect the council. Okay? That they're going to make that determination. They'll decide. And there shouldn't be, we don't have to talk to them. We've got a job to do. That's what we believe, this majority. To place on a ballot, not to place on a ballot, to submit the proposal to the council. Well, we did our job, because that's what I believe. I cannot sleep, that's the kind of a guy I am, even bargaining a lot of union contracts all over the country. I couldn't sleep nights if I didn't do my job. I wouldn't be able to sleep to come here and say, well, I'm not going to do it because I'm afraid of the council. No. I'm going to put that out. You council, you make that determination if it passes this party.
Mr. Chairman, if somebody else doesn't have the floor, may I? I'm not, right now, my issue is not whether we vote for partisan form of government or not. This is my issue. My issue is the procedure that we agreed on as this body to follow. We said we were going section by section. Now, I understand that that's tedious, but the reason that we said we were going to do that proves every time our solicitor speaks about the previous changes that were made by previous councils that the last commission worked so hard to put forward, and they changed things that messed up the language of our charter. We said we were going to go step by step so we didn't miss anything and we didn't make any mistakes with the language, and that would give our solicitor and the law office chance to keep catching up with what we want for language. We agreed on that. I'm not against what Commissioner Farry is saying. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. I'm saying the way it's being presented. I don't understand why he can't make his motion and we do it step by step. I don't understand why it can't come up on the agenda when we're speaking about different departments or different, if we're speaking to the city council, if we're speaking to the mayor, why can't it come up then? And it can be brought up that our Mr. Farrier would like it that, and then we vote on it. I don't understand why we're changing procedure. And this is what gets really confusing because this is a lot to pay attention to begin with. And we're here, yes, we all taking time out of our lives to do this. I understand some people want to rush the procedure, but I don't think that that's smart. Not when you're talking about such an important document. I don't think it's smart at all. And I think we're all intelligent enough to know that we need to read it. We need to go step by step. We need to make sure that we're making the right decisions. To do blanket things is only causing more work for the law department, and it's confusing people and going against the procedure that we agreed upon. But that's my opinion.
Through the chair, Judy, I heard many a times here that we can place on a docket anything we show to. That was said by the chairman, and that's why I did exactly. I'm going by the procedure. We can do that. I would not come in and just put something on on a docket, okay? Without listening very clear. And if you remember, all you got to do is sit back and remember. And I'm not going to ask you individually. The procedure, yes. But at the same time, it was said loud and clear that we could submit proposals at any time on a docket. That's what I said.
Mr. Farrier,
I'm on the right procedure. I'm going to call the vote, Mr. Chair, and then people.
how are you calling the vote? You're not the chair.
Huh? I'm sorry.
How are you calling the vote, sir?
No, not calling the vote.
Oh, okay.
It would have been making a motion. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Mr.
Can't
Chairman,
call the vote.
Mr. Chairman, when I first made these proposals, it was like our second meeting, and my motive was to have conversation on those issues, to then make a decision as to whether we go forward with it to the city council. I made the motion, and after conversation by this commission, I realized that maybe I should just table it until we get to that section of the charter. And that was my motive, okay? My motive, I agree with John about we need partisan elections, 100%. How many times have you seen in this city primary elections where somebody wins like a 3-1 vote with 4 or 5 people in the race, and then even though they won by several hundred votes, they have to put up another campaign for the general election to prove it over again. To me, that's a waste of money. If the guy won by, or the woman won by 300 votes on a primary, why did I have to go back and win by another 300 votes in the general election? To me, having an election with no purpose at all. So that's one of my reasons to save money, okay? And then plus, we already know, most times we already know who's going to win, as you know by looking at the primary. So that was one reason why. And the other reason is why I looked at 8 cities in the state of Rhode Island, okay? Of 8, 7 of them have partisan elections. Okay, so why can't these farmers do that? I'll just look at 7-member council, same thing. Why are we different from everybody else? Why are we different from everybody else? Why can't we, now that we have a mayor form of government, and we're trying to adjust our government to that form of government, why can't we just do what we need to do and make us a full mayor form of government.
Chairman, Joe, you and I had a couple of conversations here. When you placed the discussion on the ballot, okay, it was a discussion today. In that, you added the 7-man council on one thing. There was a discussion. It didn't say a discussion and a vote. So even so you did that, it is my right as a committee manager to bring that as a motion, a discussion and a vote. That's part of Robert Rules of Order. That I can do that. Okay? So it's not that you felt, well, we table, I should do that. No. You could have done, okay, and I think I told you here is, what you could have done is, because I thought you, maybe I'm wrong, I apologize. I thought you mentioned also non-binding. And I said to you, excuse me, Joe, I said, non-binding is bad news because it's non-binding. You got to come back 2 years from now and the mood may be different. So if you believe on something, okay, have a discussion and a vote. Am I correct that we have that discussion?
The point well made, John. I agree
Yeah.
what you said about the binding and nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Because I remember a lot of years ago,
Yeah, you were on the committee. Yeah,
we
yeah.
got burnt on the mayor form of government because we didn't make it binding. We
Exactly.
had a primary election, and the mayor form of government won almost like a 3-1 margin. But it wasn't binding.
I understand. Yeah, exactly.
So then we had to bring it to the November election.
Exactly.
Now, by this time, there's a lot of campaigning being done by established politicians in the city that, oh, no, we don't want that. We don't want that kind of government in our city. And so come November, it got beat.
Because you know, Joe, excuse me, to the chair, and I'll do this. The majority of the players on the city of East Providence, I remember it was today, okay? They massaged this. A lot of people wanted it. It was just like the mayor, former government. They want it, some of them, but they don't want it. Do you know what I'm saying? So they try to get away from it. What they did with that is to do what? Well, let's have non-binding. And when you're talking about non-binding, what does that mean? You're testing the waters with the people. That's what you're doing. And now, assuming even that you pass a non-binding, you got to come back next election to do that. It doesn't make sense. So that was totally wrong. Well, let's see if the people want it. Okay, so let's say people want it. Well, 2 years from now, whatever next, you got to do the same thing. My opinion, that was done wrong. My opinion, I mean, I could be wrong. My opinion was done wrong. If you're going to place it on a ballot, it's partisan, not partisan. It's binding. You don't even have to say binding. The mistake here is that we said non-binding. That was the problem. When we did the mayor form of government, what we did was put on the ballot and a mayor. And people, exactly the same. I am not blaming the council, but over the 25 years that I personally worked on that, okay? When I say personally, and others, obviously, nobody does nothing, but collectively with the Democratic Party as chairman, that was one of my goals when I came in. And thank God I had the majority of the committee supporting that 100%. Because I think if you remember back then what happened, how many managers that we had? If people who get fired, 1 year you had about 3 or 4 or 5. It was a disgrace for the city. So it was an appetite for the people. So it was an appetite. The time was perfect. There was an appetite for the people. So we're not going to put non-binding just to give people test the waters now. So that's what I'm coming from. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be making a motion. The motion is made in second anyway, so you just got to call the roll call.
Who made the second?
I'm seconding it.
You second.
Discussion. As a lifetime member of a political party, okay, I philosophically fear partisan elections. The reason I do that is that if you look at our elected officials today, 5 members of the city council, 5 members of the school committee, mayor, what do they all have in common? Every single one of those candidates won by a majority vote. Not a single elected official in the history of our city has been elected by a plurality. Now, a plurality happens when you have more than 2 candidates running for an elected office, and one of them wins with, let's say, 40% of the vote or 30% of the vote. Our charter today precludes that from happening. It guarantees that the candidates meet in a runoff primary, and then the top 2 vote getters get on the ballot. Once you've got 2 vote getters, you're either going to get a tie or a majority. Now, Mr. Tavares mentioned a real good example. I want to commend him for it. And that is, what happens to this poor guy who is a popular candidate in a primary, wins overwhelmingly, and then has to run again? Language could be incorporated in the existing charter that anyone who wins a primary by 50% or greater automatically
Goes to the judge.
goes, becomes the elected, that happens in other states. What I'm afraid of is not the designation of a person being a Democrat or a Republican or a People's Party or a no-label party or the Green Party. But once we make it partisan, now you're slotted. You want to run as a Democrat? You're slotted. Now all the Democrats have to run against each other. The Republicans run against each other. Okay. And in a two-party system, if we had a two-party system, there's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about political parties. There's no such thing as a two-party system in federal law, in state law. Okay. There can be as many political parties as people have their creativity to imagine. Okay. So now there's a Democratic candidate, there's a Republican candidate, and we all know that everyone in East Providence is absolutely above board, honest, and straightforward. But someone could move in who is devious and looks at this and says, you know what? If we get somebody to run for office to take votes away from candidate A, even though he is the most popular and probably the most qualified candidate, we can get candidate B elected. Okay? And they put forward a straw man. And it doesn't have to be a straw man, it can be straw men. It doesn't have to be just creating a third person to siphon away power and votes, but you could get a fourth. Okay? Now, there was a famous mayor in Providence who always won three-person elections, but could never win a two-person election. I'm not saying that they had straw people, but this individual was always winning with 38%, 47%, something like that, but never over 50%. I believe in majority rule. That's my philosophy. And you have every right in the world not to agree with me or whatever. But I know when Mayor De Silva gets up there to address the city, that the voters in East Providence know that beyond 50% of the people voted for him to hold that office. The same thing with councilmen, all 5 council members, and the same thing with all 5 school committee members. And I do not want to put that in jeopardy. I think in my lifetime, I've been able to determine which political party most of the candidates belong and what their philosophy is. I don't think anyone walking into the ballot box last November didn't know the political leanings of the individuals on the ballot. I really don't. I think we all know who supported who. Okay, and there was no question about it. I have no problem. My problem is in all candor, lifetime Democrat. And I noticed that Democrats proudly put endorse Democrat on their signs. And then there's other parties that don't. They just leave it blank. No. Okay, what are you? Okay, but that doesn't change whether you vote for that individual or not, because you know they're probably hiding something. And we vote for the people that we want to vote for, and the majority rules. That's the strength of democracy. And in small local elections, it's extraordinarily easy to tilt the balance. Senate, House of Representatives, governor, where you've got huge amounts of votes, it's much more difficult. Mayor would probably be difficult in East Providence because it's citywide. And so would the at-large offices. But your local ward offices, where you're talking about, very small voter turnout, and, it would just be too easy to get creative, for lack of a better term. I don't want to say these people are corrupt or anything like that, but people get creative. And that's my philosophical reason why I do not support partisan elections, okay? Now, that doesn't mean you're wrong, or you or anyone who votes to support this is wrong. But that's why Manny Vinatiero feels that by remaining nonpartisan, we guarantee majority rule. There's no way with the existing charter that we can get someone in office by plurality. Thank you.
And I respect your opinion, man. We had the same problem when we fought to have a mayor form of government. The words that Mr. Vinatiero just brought up, and I respect them a great deal, came out when we had the strong mayor. But look at today. The minute that was given the opportunity to the voters on the city of East Providence, they passed 75%. It was really the city council over the years, Manny, because I've been involved politically since I got here from Canada at age 21. So it passed. Now you look at the city. You have a lot of, and I respect many great people, but you have a lot of people in this city. I just happen to represent, with the labor movement, about 7,000 members. 7,000 friends that I talk to. Not the friends, but I'm talking about the leadership. But sometimes you listen, even though, but I respect the opinion they like to see, but I personally, since we got the mayor form of government, that was the direction we pulled back, and the reason why, it was because being concerned and not passive. But you made a point. The mayor, and this is not for Mayor De Silva. Mayor De Silva is young. He may do something else in a short time. Who the hell knows? Next year, 2 years. That's his business, not mine. This is for the future of the city. Now, you're talking about the mayor won the elections over 50%. So he had to run with a person who was number two. He could very well lose the elections if that number two guy was smart enough to accumulate the votes from the other. There's a guy who won by that percentage that could have lost. Okay. But anyway, I'm going to move the question because I'm going to be voting. I respect your opinion. I mean, I think we discussed long enough. The other day, I discussed things for about a minute and a half, and then I was shut off. But go ahead, Manny. And then everybody votes their way. I mean, I'm not. So
when that second candidate, when you've got two candidates, one of them is going to get a majority. Period. What I'm saying is majority should rule in a democracy, not plurality.
I understand. But that is your opinion. I respect your opinion.
Right.
I hope that would you respect my opinion because of what I believe. And it's not. a
After this
two-party
vote,
system.
John,
Huh?
we're still going to be commissioners.
Yeah.
We're going to meet next, and then you'll vote with me on something else.
And you know, and you may have, because I think we have a smart council. Sometimes I understand we could be happy with half a loaf. They may be creative, and I think the council could be creative, of say, well, we're going to massage this language. I'm not totally supportive of this. They may come up with something else. And I don't know, because currently some are saying they're not going to be supporting, because we had this vote, Manny, by the way, for smart people on the council, just like yourself. We had Billy Conley, his father, was a member. Fazioli. We had Sister Perry here, Sister Perry. A lot of good people. And let me tell you something. Yeah, we debated. We came out of there real respecting one another. And there was one person who voted the other way. But that's fine. So it's 6-5. Not to have the mayor form of government. This is the last charter. So that's what we are. I respect your opinion. Hopefully you respect mine.
John,
If
I'm
the
not
vote
talking
carries
about
there-
the mayor form of government at all.
Huh?
I'm talking about.
I understand what your motive. I
Okay.
understand. I heard you.
Yeah, well,
But you're not hating me. I mean, if you're not listening to what I'm saying. I mean, I respect you, just respect my opinion.
No, no,
I am going to make the motion, and at this stage of the game, I'm making a motion. I think the motion is made. Mr. Chairman, call the vote.
So, John, you made a motion. Was there a second?
There is a second already. This was a discussion.
Procedurally, you could call the roll now.
Yeah, can I have a roll call vote?
Aye.
Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Ms. Perry votes nay. Mr. Rogers.
Aye.
Ms. Silva.
Aye.
Mr. Sulo.
Aye.
Mr. Tavares.
All right,
Mr. Vinatiero.
nay.
Ms. Chairman Furtado.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Next item?
Was the vote 7-1, Ms.
6-2.
6-2?
I mean, I'm sorry.
Huh?
1, 2. 7-2.
Okay.
Next item? Next item is C.
The other motion,
Hold on one,
I'm sorry.
hold on 1 second, John. I have to recuse myself on this vote, so Manny, I have a conflict of interest on this, so. Manny, you get the-
Madam Secretary,
Discussion and vote for pay increases for mayor, city council, and school committee. John Farrier.
Mr. Farrier?
Councilman Frick. The reason why I look at the rates of the school committee and the council, and to me, the increases that we're going to be talking about, this city can afford, because I think I give a lot of credit to the council and the school committee. You're talking about for the short money that they're getting, the weekends they got to leave their families and go out and make their presence on their wards. And all I got to see, not that I don't want as much now, because I've been ill, but aside from that, but I see them on Facebook. It's like the mayor. These guys are out all the time. They have 2 meetings, as we all know, weekly. And aside from that, they have other meetings. You see the budget meetings with administration. To me, there's a lot of work that for short money, and I have, not to my knowledge, unless somebody knows better than me, that I've all these years that these folks get an increase. So I'm going to go with but I'm going to go back with the mayor, because I think I went ahead of the game, but it's okay. So, but with the city council, what I'm proposing on the city council is this. City council, they getting $3,500 each. And let me tell you something. When you're talking about a city council getting $3,500 for what they do, And the reason why, as you know, there's a lot more work with the city manager. I mean, I'm sorry, with the mayor form of government. So I'm going to propose an increase, and I'll listen to the discussion. It's $3,500 that they currently have. I am going to be making a motion to double up. And the president of the council will get, which they do that now, they get an extra $1,000. Okay? And they continue to get that $1,000. I may disagree, you may disagree with certain things on the council, but they get a job to do. They get a job to do. The reason why they vote on certain things that I may disagree, but they know the reason why. They may have a better reason than John Ferrier had. I'm not going to disrespect the job as a citizen. I am willing as a taxpayer to pay that kind of money to the council for the job that they do. Okay. So that's what that. But I'm going to. I don't know, Mr. Chairman. I know that we can vote individually because that's for the city council. I'm going to shift over to the mayor, and then I'll talk about the school committee. Okay? When I was on the Charter Commission, I think Mr. Sperry was there, we agreed, we voted on the $90,000 for the mayor. And I got to be honest with you, because I think I'm a guy with credibility. I thought that, I don't know why I was thinking in that direction, that the mayor would have an annual increase like department heads. So the last 4 years, there's no increase for the mayor. And I think it's absurd. I mean, you're talking about him or anybody else. You're talking about someone who's doing a great job for the city. You all know that because you all know the mayor, doing a great job. The kid works, 20 hours a day. You know, the weekends, you see him on all over the place. And I say 90? And then I don't care if it's anybody else. So I'm going to be proposing an increase for the mayor, $10,000 to $100,000, and 1.5% annually increase upon passage. And I think the passage is 2024. So I'm just telling you, I'm going to be making that motion, but it's going to be, we're going to have a discussion on that. School committee, and the school committee, they're getting the same thing as the council. They're getting 35, 35, 35, and 45 for the chairperson. Again, you all know the job that the school committee has. There's a lot of work here. We're talking about budgets with the city. There's things that, that these folks do, not as much as the council going out, but they still get involved in a lot of, things with the, Manny will know more than me with the school committee. So again, I believe that deserve a decent wages increase. And that is to double up the 35 to the 7,000. And the chairman, it would be like the city council. You get $1,000, I'm sorry. I always thought, to be honest with you, that the city council would get more than the school committee. And the answer is no. I found out today, I did my own work, make the calls, they're getting the same. And I want to tell you something. I would urge you folks to vote on this because it's only fair for the work that they do. Look at the criticism that the councilman tested there. He puts a stop sign across the street, but the other side doesn't have it. Right away, they want to whack the shit out of the guy. And then he's got to go home upset because someone accused him of putting a sign somewhere else. I'm just talking of just a little example, And I'm not saying you take it on your wife, but you go home not feeling good about yourself, thinking that you're doing a hell of a job for the city. But you get someone who disagrees, and you know that. It's a thankless job when you're talking about school committee and council. And if we believe it is, and I never been on a council, but attending council meetings, because I attend every single council meeting here on the phone. I don't care if I'm in Florida or here. That's what I'm at. I think the motions would be pretty much that. The mayor, and it's upon passage, which it would be, I think, if the council, my understanding, they're going to place that on the ballot on 24. That's what I'm hearing. And if they decide to do that, it's fine. It's not my call, it's their call. But upon passage, the mayor, the council, and the school committee should get the increases. I still think my councilman, when I live in, I spent some times up in Florida, they're getting 25,000. Yeah, that's what they have. The mayor that's part-time gets 50,000. I think around that. I don't want to. The mayor part-time, and they get a city manager. And the mayor who gets paid 50 grand. But those are systems that I honestly believe that I would urge this commission, because you all know the council. You've been there before. You've been on the school committee. You know how much work is involved. And certainly the $3,500 doesn't do the trick. And when you're talking about doubling up, that's still not a hell of a lot of money. And make a motion to decrease, because, please, at least someone will respect, well, I'm doing the job. It's not a lot of money, but at least what they did, this commission, is improve our quality of life by giving us that increase. So I don't know if we had a discussion that you gentlemen, ladies, want to have. But that is what I'm at.
Are you putting that in the form of a motion?
I am going to put it in a form of a motion, yes.
There's a motion.
Second?
Second by Mr. Sulo. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
What is the motion?
Yeah, I just want a little bit of clarity on the motion. So I think we had 3 separate identified parties and 3 separate identified increases. So just Mayor, what was the proposed increase?
Mayor would be the salary going in to $100,000. Annual increase upon passage, 1.5%. Okay, that's for the mayor. The city council, $7,000 each council. And the president of the council gets an extra $1,000. School committee, $3,500. The chairperson of the school committee gets an extra $1,000. They get the extra $1,000 now. So that's,
Can you clarify that, please, John?
huh?
Could you clarify that? The school committee figures, I thought they were different.
No, it's the same.
Well, you just said it was different.
No, the school committee currently gets 35. The double up is 7.
Right, but you didn't say that.
Oh, I'm
You
sorry,
said
I
30.
apologize.
You said 3,500 and 1,000. Okay.
It's 7, yeah.
Now, a question to you, John.
Yeah.
I looked in the charter regarding the school committee. There's no compensation item in the charter.
It's the ordinance what to do, and I'll ask with the advice of counselor, but this is would go on the charter.
Okay,
That would be on a charter.
It was,
I'm sorry.
It could be on a charter, sure.
that
The
was,
rates right now, with what they do now is, and it's pretty sad, they get a vote. City council. Listen, I supported the city council when they were talking about as chairman of the party with medical. I fought hard to make sure that the city council should have medical. Because there was, at one time, I don't know, it was a little mistake, but I don't know if you remember that. Blue Cross cutting the medical and all that. They should have that. And I think they do anyway. It's an option, because most of them are retired, they get their own option. So Mandy, you were saying.
My question is, in the existing charter,
Okay,
we have compensation language
ordinance, yeah, I get it.
under
Ordinance, I understand.
council and mayor. It's missing in the school committee. It's not in there. Are you proposing
We insert the language and the salaries into the charter.
into the charter? Okay. Could you be more specific? I understand the figures that
The
you,
perspective article and section.
right? What happens in the future when there is no charter amendment? Is there some vehicle, is there some methodology of, for lack of a better term,
For them to improve the.
for increases?
What I thought is, because my understanding is, Manning, that you folks are, I'm appointed, you folks are elected for what, 8 years or something? Okay. That's what you are, right?
Correct.
The city council has the power to change the charter. Right now, what they have to do is, the way you get an increase, they got to vote today, let's say November. There's a period of time they got to vote on, right? And the next council gets the money.
Mhm.
That's how it is. So if you
Right.
don't want to get the money, but the new people come in, get the money. Well, I don't think it's a good system. So what happens is this, and that's the reason why, in my opinion, again, observing, okay, the increases over the years, that what you have is, you have the city council says, I'm going to go out anyway. Why should I get an increase for someone else? And nobody gets an increase. So you're back in square one at $3,500. Okay. Now, should we have a mechanism for the future? I have no problem with that.
No, I was just curious if there was some,
Mechanism for get to get an increase.
or is this a one-time and then leave it up to the next, in 4 years revisit it?
But they haven't done nothing here in about, I don't know,
Yeah, I'm
as long as I can remember.
just,
I respect
I am
that.
curious. Look, they work hard, they're not getting minimum wage.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
yeah, I'm a little confused. I had wanted to ask about this. Now, according to the charter, it says the mayor shall receive such annual compensation as determined by ordinance. So are we saying that we are going to delete this section of the charter and put in language with the,
My motions would be to insert the new language on the charter, and you'd be deleting what you have in order. Now, we've got a council that I think would be down, okay? Because the voters ultimately would make that determination, unless the council tells me something different.
So I think if I understand the two questions incoming and the intent of the mover, the intent to add the dollar amounts to the charter, I believe, are clear. The follow-up is whether or not they could be changed. If I'm understanding the sentiment of the mover, it sounds like the mover would be comfortable with establishing these as floors, where subject to increases via ordinance, which is what it currently is. I don't know if that's what the other questions were or weren't, or if this is just a one-time, just this is the dollar amount, and in order to change that, you need a charter amendment.
But you have now with the ordinance. Nobody's doing that, and the reason was, Councilor, is why? Because this council is leaving, and what am I going to make? I'm going to make a motion for the next council to have money and never happen. That's the problem that you have. So I think I think it's a step on the right direction. On the charter, okay? Now, we've got folks that are elected for, 8-year terms or something, or 9. Nobody's going to come from the outside. I know what's like talking about increasing, being in a labor movement. Nobody's going to come from the outside and say they should have, but I think we're smart enough because we know the council. We know how much work they do with the city council. We know the school committee, how much work they do. We may not think, but when I see these guys, it's at the park, it's at the meetings. I mean, you have problems today, Manny, believe it or not, getting people to serve on a school committee. You've gotten people hard,
I know.
and you can't get people for the council. I sat down with Bruce Rogers a few years back to get someone for the council 3 times. He was my vice chair. We couldn't get anybody. Remember Rebello?
Through the chair.
You can't get people. Okay?
Ms. Silva?
I just have a question for solicitor. Because I don't have the language in front of me, and I probably could find it, but I'd have to go searching. Is it that the city council and the school committee, is that considered a salary or a stipend?
It doesn't matter, stipend, salary.
Yeah, I would just put it down as compensation. That would be it.
Okay. Now, because I would think that the mayor office would be considered a salary because it's $90,000 per year. My other question is, Cost of living, there's no cost of living increase that comes into play with this? Or does that have to be put in the charter?
You would have to put that language in if you wanted that to occur.
Okay. And so previously, there is no such thing, not even in an ordinance.
I don't believe so, but I'm speaking off the top of my head. I'm not sure if there is any sort of cost of living increase for any party. I don't believe so.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Julie,
that's
are
fine.
you surrendering the floor?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Mr. Tavares?
Just for clarification, so if we put it in the charter, does that mean the ordinance that states what the charter, what the salary is, has to be deleted?
It doesn't have to be deleted in the sense that there's a violation if it isn't deleted, but it's the ordinance cannot disagree with the charter. The charter controls. It doesn't matter what an ordinance says if it's conflicting with the charter.
Through the chair.
Mr. Rogers?
So, Mr. Solicitor, it is, in your opinion, it's illegal, even though it says that the compensation is established by ordinance, which is by the city council, correct? The ordinance is it is legal to put in a salary. That's question A. In question B, they will have to establish a charter commission in order to change the salary in the future.
Now, you can establish a salary. What I would do in drafting the language is I would find any other area of the charter which created an ambiguity or a conflict with that language, or at least make every effort to find any area of the charter that there was a conflict or an ambiguity. And a portion of the amendment would include striking the language that creates the conflict or the ambiguity. I'm sorry, you asked two questions. What was the second part?
Part was a charter commission would have to be established in the future to change the salary.
Not a charter commission, but a charter amendment. So they would have to, the council doesn't require a charter commission in order to amend the charter. They can just submit a resolution onto the ballot.
And in your opinion, has that ever been, have you ever seen that in any other city? Or, I mean, has that been established that way? Wouldn't the city council be hesitant in doing that, even though it doesn't affect them? And if it does affect them if they run for reelection after that's passed, wouldn't that preclude or kind of hold their feet to the fire on that they won't ever be able to do it because it would be establishing a salary increase for possibly for themselves?
It's a,
But you get that problem now. Because that's how they get with the ordinance.
And they've
They've got
never,
to vote
and John,
for
they've
the
never done it.
Oh, I
Yeah.
know, but the city
Right?
council now has to vote on the ordinance.
Right.
Has to vote the year prior. For the new folks that come in, they get the, or could be them, don't know, they get the increase. Hear what I think. Hear what I think. Council. Hear what I think. If the council feels there's an increase, the problem is the same. And you're right, Bruce. They've never got an increase. Because every time I talk to them, well, we got to vote. And of course, they're self-conscious about voting because they voted for themselves. But I think there is a great opportunity with this commission, okay? That two things, they have the power to pass a resolution and place it on a ballot, an increase for the council. They can do that. Am I correct?
you can.
You can. So they can do that. Or they can call you folks, they can call us 8 years from now to go over the, but I think one of the reasons that this increase, because I didn't go with $1,000, double up is still not a lot of money because you don't know when they're going to get next increase.
Mr. Chairman, can you just
Yes.
clarify, or can the city solicitor clarify when we propose for this to take place? Because
Well, it
Very
would be a charter amendment. So it couldn't take place until after the election, after the voters would have to pass it
Have to
in
pass it.
2024.
so it can go on, if everything moves smoothly like we would like, or however, and it goes to the council and the council approves to put it on the ballot, it would go on the 2024 ballot to be effective 2 years from then?
No.
Or a year from then?
Effective Upon passage.
I don't know whether or not we can do that.
Huh?
That
I
was
don't
gonna
know,
be my
but that
question.
would
Is
be
it-
the motion if it can be done.
it
Yeah,
legal?
I don't know.
I don't know. It may be because it's by referendum. I know you can't vote yourself a salary raise while you're in the
I understand, but
position,
we.
but it may be
but here-
different because it would be a
I
referendum.
understand it, but here we're saying upon passage,
I don't.
the salary is going to affect. It could be the very next paycheck. That's clear language, doable.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
that
I don't
conflicts
think,
with state law.
So
I don't know
I'm
if there's any state law, and I think the charter, if we get the charter, I don't know. And then again, the council, the world I live in is you can pass upon passage, you will get your salary on the first paycheck. That's normally the way it is.
Right.
I don't know,
And-
why would?
Mr. Farrier, excuse me. The election takes place in November
24.
2024. The existing city council, the existing mayor, and the existing school committee, their terms expire in December.
26. The school committee expires on 24. The council and the mayor expires on 26.
Okay. So here's where I'm, Dylan,
yeah.
if they vote to put this on the ballot, are they somehow,
They may not be able to do it.
yeah, I think is that an ethical violation?
So there's a provision. I don't know if it's in the state ethics code. It may be that basically you can't vote on a salary raise or any increase in compensation that would occur during that term.
Well, the empire.
So there is an interesting question off the top of my head. I don't know the answer to. Is the party that's actually voting to establish this is the people.
Correct.
So it may be slightly different.
And
However, playing devil's advocate, they are voting to accept that charter amendment to be placed on the ballot. That's where I think the violation, and I'm
And I don't know.
playing
the
devil's advocate again.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
It'll spell out the salaries when they're going to affect. That's, you got to do that.
Is that double jeopardy?
Could we get around this by saying January, John, I know we all want to give
No, I understand. And
due compensation, okay? But I think, well, I know Dylan's going to research this right to the root, but if necessary, could we say the effective date would be January 27?
but
Now there's no guarantee. That's the next term.
But you know what you just did? You took away the council that was currently now that when you get an increase.
But they can't vote for their own increase. That's
But
the
they're not voting for the increase. What they're doing, they're voting to place on the ballot.
correct. And that's where I think there's an ethical
The people
problem.
are voting to give them an increase. All they're voting is to put on the ballot.
Can we ask Dylan to do the research?
I don't think I'm so wrong, but I've been wrong before, okay? And I think the motion is, as I made. I don't know, anybody wrote the motion down? And if she finds out different, then,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
what about the point that there is a commission, an elected and appointed commission, making the recommendation to the council? Even though they're voting on it, we still represent the people who will eventually.
We
be
do.
voting.
We do, but
I'm happy to include, hopefully a responsive memo at the same time that I include draft language. So we will have a definitive answer.
yeah.
I understand the consensus to be effective as soon as possible. That's what I'll do my research on, and I will determine how quickly it can be effective.
but the motion is effective at passage, and then the passage depends on the fair vote. That's normal.
As we continue to play it out,
I
I can imagine it being effective for the school committee and the mayor immediately, and then the council has to wait a full term because they're voting on the resolution, right? So this is a fun one. This is a bar exam question.
I talked to the mayor today, and he says, John, it should go to 2027. You know what I said? It is wrong. Why should you wait? Because my position is going to be, okay, to increase the salaries of the city council and school committee. and you should be included. Okay, that's what we are.
Okay.
But I understand if it's, then we can actually modify our position if we come with a different,
Yes.
recommendation, not recommendation. There's a certain law. I don't think it is, but I understand what he's saying.
Mhm.
You're going to be voting, but I think it's the people that are going to be voting on the question.
But when Dylan does the research, then there's no more thinking.
Well, then
Then we know.
exactly.
That's why his father paid those big bills to send him to law school.
I caught law school.
All right, so,
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any more discussion? Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
aye.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mrs. Perry votes aye. Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Silva?
Aye.
Mr. Sulo?
Aye.
Mr. Tavares?
Aye.
Mr. Vinatiero?
Aye.
How many?
No, it's side, all the
got everyone? We got
The chairman reassumes the chair.
Next item?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Aye. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye.